Lord of the universe in unflinching devotional service gives up all aspirations to be promoted to heavenly planets or to become happy in this world with wealth, children, cattle, home, or anything in relationship with the body. I take him to the other side of birth and death. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. Unflinching devotional service, as described in these two verses, means engaging oneself in full Krishna consciousness or devotional service. Accepting the Supreme Lord as all in all. Since the Supreme Lord is all inclusive, if anyone worships him with unflinching faith, he has automatically achieved all other opulences and performed all other duties. The Lord promises herein that he takes his devotee to the other side of birth and death. Lord Chaitanya therefore recommended that one who aspires to go beyond birth and death should have no material possessions. This means that one should not try to be happy in this material world or to be promoted to the heavenly world, nor should he try for material wealth, children, houses, or cattle. How liberation is imperceptibly achieved by a pure devotee and what the symptoms are have been explained. For the conditioned soul, there are two statutes of living. One status is in this present life, and the other is our preparation for the next life. If I am in the mode of goodness, then I may be preparing for promotion to the higher planets. If I am in a mode of passion, then I shall remain here in a society where activity is very prominent. And if I am in the mode of good ignorance, I may be degraded to animal life or a lower grade of human life. But for a devotee, there is no concern for this life or the next life, because in any life, he does not desire elevation in material prosperity or a high grade or low grade life. He prays to the Lord, my dear Lord, it does not matter where I am born, but let me be born even as an ant in the house of a devotee. A pure devotee does not pray to the Lord for liberation from the material bondage. Actually, the pure devotee never thinks that he is fit for liberation. I'm sorry. Considering his past life and his mischievous activities, he thinks that he is fit to be sent to the lowest region of hell. If in this life I am trying to become a devotee, this does not mean that in my past lives I was 100% pious. That is not possible. A devotee, therefore, is always conscious of his real position. Only by his full surrender to the Lord and by the Lord's grace are his sufferings made shorter. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto me, and I will give you protection from all kinds of sinful reactions. That is his mercy, meaning Krishna's mercy to the devotee. But this does not mean that one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord has committed no misdeeds in his past life. A devotee always prays always prays, for my misdeeds, may I be born again and again. But my only prayer is that I may not forget your servant. The devotee has that much mental strength, and he prays to the Lord, may I be born again and again, but let me be born in the home of your pure devotee, so that I may again get a chance to develop myself. A pure devotee is not anxious to elevate himself in his next birth. He has already given up that sort of hope. In any life in which one is born as a householder or even as an animal, one must have some children, some resources, or some possessions. But a devotee is not anxious to possess resources or some possessions. I'm sorry. But a devotee is not anxious to possess anything. He is satisfied with whatever is obtainable by God's grace. He is not at all attached to improving his social status or improving the status of education of his children. He is not neglectful. He is dutiful, but he does not spend too much time on the upliftment of temporary household or social life. He fully engages in the service of the Lord, and for other affairs, he simply spares as much time as absolutely necessary. Yatar ham upayun jataha. Such a pure devotee does not care for what is going to happen in the next life or in this life. He does not care even for family, children, or society. He fully engages in the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that without knowledge of the devotee, the Lord arranges us. Without, I'm sorry, it is stated in Bhagavad Gita that without the knowledge of the devotee, the Lord arranges for his devotee to be immediately transferred to his transcendental abode just after leaving his body. After quitting his body, he does not go into the womb of another mother. The ordinary common living entity after death is transferred to the womb of another mother, and according to his karma or activity, to take another type of body. But as far as the devotee is concerned, he is at once transferred to the spiritual world in the association of the Lord. That is the Lord's special mercy. How it is possible is explained in the following verses. Because he is all powerful, the Lord can do anything and everything. He can excuse all sinful reactions. He can immediately transfer a person to Vaikuntha Loka. That is the inconceivable power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is favorably disposed to the pure devotee. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Well, there we see the genuine devotee has what you would call supernatural powers, and but he only uses them for advancement in Krishna consciousness. And Krishna is going to protect the devotee and in every way make sure that he does not, let's say, fall down from the position of devotional service. Take a look at some of the takeaways for this long purport. Well, first of all, these are two verses, text 39 and 40. They're together. And in the purport, it says, unflinching devotional service, as described in these two verses, mean engaging oneself in full Krishna consciousness or devotional service, accepting the Supreme Lord as all in all. Since the Supreme Lord is all inclusive, if anyone worships him with unflinching faith, he has automatically achieved all other opulences and performed all other duties. The Lord promises herein that he takes his devotee to the other side of birth and death. Okay, that's promise. We have the Lord is a promise keeper, let's put it like that. So we should take that seriously. Lord Chaitanya therefore recommended that one who aspires to go beyond birth and death should have no material possessions. This means that one should not try to be happy in this world or to be promoted to the heavenly world, nor should he try for material wealth, children, houses, or cattle. Very interesting statement. Well, let's take a look at Nanda Maharaj. He had thousands of cows, right? And let's put it like this: he was not attached to the material world. He was attached to his son Krishna, of course, but not to the material world. But he had a lot of material opulence, was very wealthy. But he only used the wealth in the service of the Lord. Okay, so let's read this again. The Lord promises herein that he takes his devotee to the other side of birth and death. Lord Chaitanya, therefore, recommended that one who aspires to go beyond birth and death should have no material possessions. This means that one should not try to be happy in this world or to be promoted to the heavenly world, nor should he try for material wealth, children, houses, or cattle. Does that mean they can have those things? No. It just means that whatever Krishna is providing for the devotee will be satisfied with that and just continue in his devotional life. How liberation is imperceptibly achieved by a pure devotee and what the symptoms are have been explained. For the conditioned soul, there are two statuses of living. One status is in this present life, and the other is our preparation for the next life. If I am in a mode of goodness, then I may be preparing for promotion to the higher planets. If I am in a mode of passion, then I should remain here in a society where activity is very prominent. And if I am in a mode of ignorance, I may be degraded to animal life or lower grade of human life. But for a devotee, there is no concern for this life or the next life, because in any life, he does not desire elevation in material prosperity or high grade or low grade life. He prays to the Lord, my dear Lord, it does not matter where I am born, but let me be born even as an ant in the house of a devotee. A pure devotee does not pray to the Lord for liberation from this material bondage. Actually, the pure devotee never thinks that he is fit for liberation. Considering his past life and his mischievous activities, he thinks that he is fit to be sent to the lowest region of hell. If in this life I am trying to become a devotee, this does not mean that in my many past lives I was 100% pious. That is not possible. A devotee, therefore, is always conscious of his real position. Only by his full surrender to the Lord, by the Lord's grace, all his sufferings uh, made shorter. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto me, and I will give you protection from all kinds of sinful action. That is his mercy, Krishna's mercy. But this does not mean that one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord has committed no misdeeds in his past life. A devotee always prays, quote, for my misdeeds, may I be born again and again, but my only prayer is that I may not forget your service. Okay, that's the real desire of a devotee. The devotee has that much mental strength, and he prays to the Lord, may I be born again and again, but let me be born in the home of your pure devotee, so that I may again get a chance to develop myself. A pure devotee is not anxious to elevate himself in his next birth. He has already given up that sort of hope. In any life in which one is born as a householder or even as an animal, one must have some children, some resources, or some possession. But a devotee is not anxious to possess resources or some possession. Oh, I'm sorry, but a devotee is not anxious to possess anything. He is satisfied with whatever is obtainable by God's grace. He is not at all attached to improving his social status or improving the status of education of his children. He is not neglectful, he is dutiful, but he does not spend too much time on the upliftment of temporary household or social life. He fully engages in the service of the Lord, and for other affairs, he simply spares as much time as absolutely necessary. Yatarham upayunjataha. Such a pure devotee does not care for what is going on, what is going to happen in the next life or in this life. He does not care even for family, children, or society. He fully engages in the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that without the knowledge of the devotee, the Lord engages for his devotee to be immediately transferred to his transcendental abode just after leaving his body. Okay, so that's a very important statement. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that without the knowledge of the devotee, the Lord engages for his devotee to be immediately transferred to his transcendental abode just after leaving his body. After quitting his body, he does not go into the womb of another mother. The ordinary common living entity after death is transferred to the womb of another mother, according to his karma or activities, to take another type of body. But as far as the devotee is concerned, he is at once transferred to the spiritual world in the association of the Lord. That is the Lord's special mercy. How it is possible is explained in the following verses. Because he is all powerful, the Lord can do anything and everything. He can excuse all sinful reactions. He can immediately transfer a person to Vaikuntha. That is the inconceivable power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is favorably disposed to the pure devotees. Okay, let's go to text 41. I'm very inquisitive here. It's going to be said. Text 41. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone. who resorts to any shelter other than myself. For I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. Let me just read that one more time. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. Okay. For I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. In other words, we should desire to surrender ourselves completely to Krishna. Why? Then we will not have this terrible fear of birth and death. There's someone who's completely surrendered to Krishna doesn't have those type of feelings. Because the devotee knows that Krishna is the Almighty Lord, Supreme Personality Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. So, this one verse is very, very important. Why? Because as people get older and older, they begin to fear death. Now, some people say, "Oh, no, I'm not afraid of death," but not really. Everyone becomes fearful. So this verse says, the terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. So it's only by taking full shelter of Krishna that one can not be, let's say, preoccupied by the horrible specter of birth and death. And he says, for I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. Well, that's called education. When we learn that Krishna is the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. So when we learn that, that's called education now. When we learn that, then we're not afraid of getting old or getting sick or dying. Of course, devotee is not preoccupied by getting old, getting sick, and dying. The devotee is concerned with devotional service. And there's a very nice, let's say, pastime of Prabhupada. You can see it on the internet. Up to the last moments of his presence on the earth, he was dictating knowledge in Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a photo of that right to his last breath. That's why it says here that the terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. So, unless one is completely surrendered to Krishna, everybody is going to be afraid of this process of birth and death. But when you take shelter of the Lord, of Krishna, then you understand Krishna is the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the supreme soul of all souls, meaning he's the super soul in the heart of every living entity. So therefore, this terrible fear of birth and death uh, is not a preoccupation of the devotee. So anyone who forgets about Krishna and wants to take shelter by other means against the specter of dying, uh, therefore uh, they will actually be afraid of dying. Uh, so therefore, it says the terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. For I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. So this is called knowledge. Knowledge is explained here. We should take shelter of Krishna because he is the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. Then we will not be fearful of birth and death. And Krishna will always protect us. So in this purport, it says, it is indicated herein that the cycle of birth and death cannot be stopped unless one is a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. It is said, Harim Vina Naiva Shritim Taranti. One cannot surpass the cycle of birth and death unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The same concept is confirmed herewith. One may take to the system of understanding the absolute truth by one's own imperfect sensory speculation, or one may try to realize the self by the mystic yoga process. But whatever one may do, unless he comes to the point of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no process can give him liberation. One may ask if this means that those who are undergoing so much penance and austerity by strictly following the rules and regulations are endeavoring in vain. This is a question. Mm-hmm. The answer is given by Srimad Bhagavatam 10:32. Yene Ravindaksha Vimuktamanina. Lord Brahma and other demigods prayed to the Lord when Krishna was in the womb of Devaki. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, there are persons who are puffed up with the thought that they may have become liberated or one with God or have become God. But in spite of thinking in such a puffed up way, their intelligence is not laudable, meaning not something that's enviable to achieve. They are less intelligent. It is stated that their intelligence, whether high or low, is not even purified. In purified intelligence, a living entity cannot think otherwise than to surrender. Bhagavad Gita, therefore, confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Okay, let's stop right there. That's a really, really important statement. The whole idea of surrendering yourself to someone is something most people do not accept. Because that means that, in the mundane sense, if you surrender yourself to someone, it means you become a slave. But if you surrender yourself to Krishna, you are a controller, not of other people, but of your mind and senses, because you will not use any of your, intellectual asset for sense gratification. So, uh, surrender to Krishna is not the same as surrendering to, let's say, a demon or surrendering to a mundane person. Uh, Surrendering to Krishna means you get ultimate liberation, ultimate freedom from the cycle of birth and death. Okay, so that means we should surrender to the right person. If you surrender to the wrong person, well, it'll be a disaster. You surrender to the right person, that means you made the right decision. Okay, so Bhagavad Gita therefore confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Without the surrendering process, one cannot achieve liberation. Okay, so I was at one point in a dilemma. Should I completely surrender myself and engage the rest of my life in Krishna consciousness? And I was only I think it was like 20, maybe 24 years old. Yeah. And because I realized after I was associating with devotees for a certain period of time that I could do this the rest of my life. And I asked myself, am I ready to do this the rest of my life? You know, I was doubtful about that, whether I could maintain myself the rest of my life. However, by seeing Prabhupada and hearing, his lectures, hearing, about him, I realized he surrendered to Krishna and he was not, let's say, bereft of anything. He attained a transcendental position. So, I thought about it. He's a person who actually is completely surrendered to Krishna and he's completely, let's say, happy and he's completely dedicated to serving the Lord and helping so many people. So I thought to myself, well, here's an example of what happens if you really surrender to Krishna. So and then I decided, okay, let me try and do it also. Not that I'm going to ever be equal to Prabhupada, but at least Prabhupada's example is very powerful. He had nothing when he came to the United States, but he was completely surrendered to Krishna, and he built this gigantic movement. So to surrender to Krishna is actually real success in life. We have to analyze things honestly. Just like who was it? I forget. He was given a choice: either surrender to Krishna or surrender to a demon. And he said, "Well, if I surrender to Krishna, I have a chance to go back to Godhead. If I surrender to the demon, I will be, I'll go to hell." So he said,
That was in the Ramayana story.
"Yeah,
The deer which Marichi.
okay, yeah, it's Marathi, yeah." So he said, "Better I surrender to Krishna." So these are the type of decisions you have to make. Who are you going to surrender to? So if we surrender to Krishna, then our problems will go away. We surrender to demons. Well, it's going to be very problematic for the rest of our life. Okay, without the surrendering process, one cannot achieve liberation. So, okay, what does that mean, liberation? Does it mean, we sprout two wings and we fly through the air to heaven or something? No. Without the surrendering process, one cannot achieve liberation. Well, the surrendering process means we give up all nonsense things and we accept all good things. Prasadam, Kirtan, and Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and so forth. So we're not surrendering does not mean you have no activities or no, let's say, uh, um, what we call ability to advance in life. You just give up what is nonsense and take to Krishna consciousness seriously. Or in a more mundane way, take the best and leave the rest. Take the best and leave the rest. So that's what happens when you become a devotee. You take the best and you leave the rest. And that's why also here in it quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 10:232. Yene Ravindaksha Vimuktamani. Lord Brahma and other demigods prayed to the Lord when Krishna was in the womb of Devaki, my dear lotus-eyed Lord. There are persons who are puffed up with the thought that they have become liberated or one with God, or have become God. But in spite of thinking in such a puffed up way, their intelligence is not laudable, meaning it's not something that is good, that is of very high achievement. They are less intelligent. It is stated that their intelligence, whether high or low, is not even purified. In purified intelligence, a living entity cannot think otherwise than to surrender. Bhagavad Gita therefore confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyante. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Well, that's a fact. And when you come in contact with Krishna consciousness, you have to surrender, right? You have to surrender. You have to not do things that you would normally do, and you have to do things that you normally would not do. Well, that's what surrender is. You're doing things that you normally would not do, such as waking up early, chanting Hare Krishna, listening to classes, going on Sankirtan, preaching, uh, you know, working day and night, festivals. No, you would not do those things, right? They're very strenuous things. And we don't see millions of people doing those things. And only a handful of people in this world that are doing those things. So we have surrendered ourselves to Krishna and given up what normal, so-called normal, or what the mass of people are doing, and we are in a real minority doing things based on devotional service. So, oftentimes, let's say you have a relative or a good friend, you haven't seen them for, let's say, 20 years or 30 years, right? And then you run run across them, and they say, "Well, how you doing? What are you doing?" "Oh, well, I'm chanting Hare Krishna." "What? What are you doing?" What? You know, they're expecting you to say, "Well, I got promoted recently. I'm VIP," and no, you say, "I'm chanting Hare Krishna." So they think, "Oh my God, this person, completely lost. They don't know what they're doing now. They made a big mistake." So that's why it says here. Uh, Bhagavad Gita therefore confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Bahunam janmanamante ganavam mam prapadyante. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. So after many, let's say, years, you meet a relative or a friend, and they say, "Oh, how are you doing?" You say, "Yeah, I'm doing very well." I say, "What are you doing?" "I am surrendering myself completely to Krishna." They would think you're crazy, right? You're expecting, well, I just got promoted in my business, in my professional life, and this thing, that thing.
Yeah,
But if you say
they'll be talking about how much 401k,
yeah, right.
your vacation or retirement plans.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So this whole concept of surrendering to Krishna is something completely out of the radar of most people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to surrender to anyone. They say, uh, usually they say, no God, no master.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's their motto. No God, no master. So we have to learn how to surrender. And actually, the surrender is not once, it's every day, right? And every day you wake up early. Every day you have so many things you have to do beside going to work, right? Chanting your rounds, bathing, and then engaging in devotional service. So that's all surrender. I mean, most people don't want to surrender, and they don't want to do all those things. Oftentimes they're very nice people, but they're afraid to join Krishna consciousness because they think they'll be forced to do things that they don't want to do. So to get that fear out of their minds, they have to associate with genuine devotees who seem to have a normal life like them, but at the same time, they're Krishna conscious, right? So they have cars, they have kids, they're going to school, they have a good job, but they're surrendered to Krishna. Now they see, oh, wait a minute, they have everything I have, but they have something that I don't have. I have not surrendered to Krishna, and I don't have a genuine spiritual life. Right? Whereas here's my friend, he has everything I have, and he has something I don't have. I don't have the surrender to the Lord. That means there's a whole, let's say, possibility of real success that they don't have. Real success is preparing oneself to go back to Godhead. And in the process of preparing oneself, one is always remembering Krishna and serving Krishna. Okay, so therefore, this word surrender is a very scary word for most people.
Mm-hmm.
They think if they surrender, then they will be exploited, right? Just like parents, they think, well, if you become a Hare Krishna, they'll take all your money away and treat you like a slave, right? And you'll no longer be our son or our daughter. We'll reject you. They threaten. They go crazy. Of course, there are some parents who are happy their kid became devotee because now the kid is acting much nicer than ever before. But some people, they think, oh, my son is a failure. He became a Hare Krishna.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, are there any questions?
Yeah.
So, Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have one question.
Yes.
So, I think this is in the earlier purport. So, there's one thing saying that we should, I mean, never try to, improve or something like that. A pure devotee is not anxious in any advancement, right? I was confused around that. Just trying
That's a
to.
very good question.
Mhm.
Very good question. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Well, let's say what does that not mean? Let's put that
Yeah.
in perspective. It doesn't mean that you cannot have a career, but it does mean that you become a devotee and you follow all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. And there are some things now that you will not do that you normally did do before. Like, for example, you won't go to parties where they're drinking liquor and talking nonsense for, 6 hours or 8 hours. And you won't associate with non devotees. You can work with non devotees, but you don't associate with them, like going to the parties and so forth. And, someone will say, hey, if we pool our money together, we can win the lottery, you know, because that, of course, does improve your chances of winning the lottery. If you get a pool of people, you get 50 people, and you invest together, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than if you're just one person. Right? But a devotee's not interested in that because that's gambling. That's actually a forbidden thing in Krishna consciousness. We should not engage in gambling. So the surrender to the Lord, we surrender or basically give up all bad behaviors, and we take up all good behaviors. That means we're actually surrendered. So there are a lot of bad behaviors. We see that in life. Uh, People are taking intoxicants. People are engaging in sex, whether it's legal sex or illegal sex. Right? Uh, what is sex meant for? It's meant only for procreating children. It's not meant for uh, you know having let's call it so-called pleasure. Actually, it's probably Prabhupada said once. Actually, people think sex is nice, but actually it's very horrible. You know. uh, uh, and now many people would not accept that statement. They would say, "Oh no, this sex is, it's real love. It's a wonderful experience, but actually, it's horrible." So, one time there was this one man. His name was Mr. Levy. He was a North African Jew who was living in Paris, and he had a business. He would sell things on the street. He had somehow or other he was able to get a stand in a very very prominent place in Paris, and he was making a lot of money selling basically junk things, but mostly uh, um, uh, but people were buying them, and he was making a lot of money. But every day, and he was buying things from me. So every time I to go and see him to deliver an order. While he would count the money to give to me, you know, uh, he would be always looking in other places at women. And then he'd stop counting the money and say, "Oh, did you see this leg? You know, did you see her leg?" It's crazy. It's completely crazy. So one day I said, "Mr. Levy," I said, if I said, "You're always looking, you know, even when you're counting money, you know, even when you're doing business, you're always looking at the women." I said, if I took my underwear off and gave it to you to wear, would you wear it? No. Are you crazy? I said, okay. But if a woman took her underwear off, what would you do? And he said, oh, I would love it. so, I said, there's something wrong here. Uh, what's the difference between my underwear and the woman's underwear? I said, no, no, no. Woman's underwear is good. Your underwear is bad. So, I mean, it was like I was joking with him, but he was serious. He was serious, say, because that was his main preoccupation in life, making money and having sex. You know, so there are many people like that, unfortunately, and because of that, they waste their whole life in trivial nonsense things, and they never get to be Krishna conscious. So here it's quoting a verse, 10th chapter, second verse, 32nd, second chapter, 32nd verse. Ye ne ravindakshavi muktamanina. Lord Brahma and other demigods prayed to the Lord when Krishna was in the womb of Devaki. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, there are persons who are puffed up with the thought that they have become liberated or one with God or have become God. But in spite of thinking in such a puffed up way, their intelligence is not laudable, not, let's say,
Praisable.
Yeah, praisable. They are less intelligent. End of quote. It is stated that their intelligence, whether high or low, is not even purified. In purified intelligence, a living entity cannot think otherwise than to surrender. Surrender to what? Surrender to Krishna. Bhagavad Gita therefore confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam prapadyante. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Okay, that's what we should focus on. After many, many births, that means after having many, many births and deaths, we eventually come to the conclusion that I should surrender completely to Krishna and spend the rest of my life engaged in devotional service. So this is a rare realization. The majority of people never come to that let's say realization, even though they may be going to church or the synagogue or whatever. Still, they're maintaining their material life. So, what is a material life and what is a spiritual life? Material life, even though they go to church, even though they give alms or they give charity, and they don't kill anybody, right? But still, they're doing things that are sinful without even knowing that they're sinful. One example of that is meat eating. Very good people, so-called very good people, they're meat eaters, and they don't consider that animals have a soul. Therefore, they can eat meat. And this became a doctrine in Krishna consciousness and in the Christianity. At a certain point, the Christians, uh, philosophers, came to the conclusion that animals do not have a soul like a human being. They said animals may have a soul, but it's not equal to a human being. And therefore, they're meant to be food for human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like a plant. Does the plant have a soul? Well, the plant may have a soul, but it's a lesser soul than a human soul. That's the way a Christian might believe. Therefore, it's meant for being eaten.
It's an incomplete philosophy.
Yes, exactly.
So as a result, over time, they interpret it the way that's fit for the business.
Exactly right. Okay.
So, and this, I mean, just one point I wanted to kind of highlight. I think Prabhuji is asking about. Here, I'll just summarize this one. It's in the prior purport. He is not at all attached.
Yeah, that's correct. That is the line I was about to read on. He is not at all attached to improving his social status or improving the status of education of his children.
But at the same time, the next statement is important. So, what attached means that's what you're meditating on. Rather than meditating on that, he's saying at the same time he's not neglectful. He is dutiful. So that means he does what is needed, but he does not spend too much time on the upliftment of the temporary household or social life. Rather, he fully engages in the service of the Lord, and for other affairs, he simply spares as much time as absolutely necessary. So that is the
Yeah,
guidance here.
I'm trying to contextualize, right? Right now we spend a lot of time, taking our kids to this various extracurricular activities and schools and drop-offs. When I read that the second, phrase, improving the status of education of his children, right? I mean, I don't know if I'm relating it right or not. So that's what popped in my mind.
Okay, you should always ask the question. You're taking a child for dance lessons.
Yeah.
You're taking your child for extracurricular activities, maybe for how to pass the SAT test or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask the fundamental question: will this liberate my child from the cycle of birth and death?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the answer to that? If you take your child to learn, dance, or to learn some like soccer sport, is this going to help my child go back to God?
Mm-hmm.
What's the answer?
I mean, if they, again, let's say in the case of some of the Indian forms of art, the idea is to develop devotion. Because let's say music, it's not that people become devotees by just hearing music. In fact, many of them think of that as a career path or just. But the intent is that they should be developing their faculties so that they can actually even develop greater devotion to the Lord. Right, Maharaj, like Annamacharya, Tyagaraja, all these people, they were devotees. They just expressed their devotion in the form of songs. And for that matter, we understand that even all the music came from Radharani, all the different ragas and so on. So it's as long as we go back to that root, there is nothing wrong in learning music or dance and those, but at the same time, like the soccer is a completely materialistic activity. There is no dovetailing back to Krishna. Unless you become a superstar in soccer and then you use the platform to always preach Krishna consciousness. That's a very
Many
rare.
those guys do that.
And once they become successful, none of them do it anyway. So I think, yeah, but at the same time, the point here is like if that becomes the main preoccupation, forgetting Krishna consciousness, then we are doing wrong.
Yeah, I think the following statement, as you read, right? He is not neglectful. He is dutiful. but he does not spend too much time on the upliftment of temporary household or social life. Just basically, you are not doing it for your the name and fame, but you are doing it for the good cause of uh, the activity that you are doing.
You're
See, if
doing
I'm
it.
learning a music, right? I mean that's a devotional music. I'm doing that towards the how do I put this? I mean, one of my teacher, the my kid's teacher said, like, gave him a hard time saying that, hey, you respect music because it is because of so many great souls developed that, so then take it seriously. Otherwise, it's not whatever, it's not worth time, right? If you don't have respect for that music, then it's not what both of us spending time.
Yeah, but there's even one point I want to share is that it's not even just respect for music. In the end, that music has to help you develop devotion to the Lord. Otherwise, that music is useless.
Yeah, I see that is the thing, right? See, if you look at the saying that social status or life, household, temporary household or social, see, it's basically at the end of the day, like, your hierarchy, saying that I'm this good, I'm that good, right? You are not saying that I'm this good and that good, right? I am just surrendering to my guru and I'm learning that art form, right? Um, yeah, in that, uh, there is no I in that process.
Well, here it says, a pure devotee is not anxious to elevate himself to his next birth. He has already given up that sort of hope.
Yeah.
In any life in which one is born as a householder or even as an animal, one
Mm-hmm.
must have some children, some resources, or some possession. But a devotee is not anxious to possess anything.
Mm-hmm.
He is satisfied with whatever is obtainable by
Mm-hmm.
God's grace. He is not at all attached to improving his social status or improving the status of education of his children.
Mm-hmm.
He is not neglectful. He is dutiful, but he
Mm-hmm.
does not spend too much time on the upliftment of temporary household or social life.
Mm-hmm.
He fully engages in the service of the Lord, and for other affairs, he simply spares as much time as absolutely necessary. Such a pure devotee does not care for what is going to happen in the next life or in this life. He does not care even for family, children, or society. He fully engages in the service of the Lord and Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
All right, so it's not that that the devotee is a lazy bum and doesn't do anything. The devotee is probably doing more than the other people are doing, but it's different. It's devotional service, and the devotee can be completely engaged in devotional service. So let's take someone like Mataji.
Saraswati Mataji.
Yes, yeah. She's engaged all day long
Yeah.
doing service, right? She's not. She's not a PhD. She's not married. She was married, but her husband was a bum, so she had to separate from him. He was beating her and things like that. So, and she's completely happy doing what she's doing. She's been doing it for like over 20 years, right? As a pujari. And people love her because she's always very kind and gentle and so forth. So, uh, uh, it's not that a person becomes inactive if they become a devotee. They oftentimes become more active than the so-called active people.
I agree with
Yeah. And they accept responsibility also, but their main concern is pleasing Guru and Krishna. It is not pleasing their own senses. So that's the difference.
I understand, Maharaj. I think that makes sense. He's not neglectful, but he's dutiful. He's just doing what is needed, and not worried about the results of that.
Well,
Expectation.
what is needed, meaning what is needed to advance Krishna consciousness.
Yeah,
And he has faith that if he does that, then everything else will be taken care of also by the mercy
yeah.
of Krishna. His
So that's what I
family,
understand.
his
That
children, and so forth.
he's not doing anything for the improvement of the status of or social status or identity, but rather doing it is as a beautiful, like Rasavati Mataji, like her performing her dharma in the temple, right? Similarly, in the context of household, like it's just doing whatever necessity, bare minimal or necessity to provide to the children, but he's complete to doing in the service of Lord.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the right summary. And in the same context, there is another question here, Maharaj. Like I think Manish Prabhu, Prabhu, you want to ask or you want me to just repeat it? I think.
Yeah, Prabhu, so
Yeah, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Maharaji. So, Maharaji, like, is surrendering to a bona fide guru is same as surrendering to Krishna, or one can directly surrender to Krishna without a guru?
Okay, it's a good question. But be absolutely honest and realistic. Do you think you could advance in spiritual life without having a guru?
No. So, like, for me,
Okay.
like, actually, it's
You
like,
answered the question. You actually need a guru
Yeah.
to advance in spiritual life. Why? Because a guru is someone who can correct you, who can show you the mistakes that you're making. That's why, because of that, some people won't accept the guru because they don't want to be corrected by anybody. Yeah. But when you accept the guru, you have to surrender and accept, bona fide instruction from a guru, which means sometimes there might be chastisement for mistakes that we make. Actually, if the guru chastises you, you should be happy. That means he's paying attention. Yeah, he's trying to help you.
And then the follow-up there is like, there's a process for accepting the guru and the guru accepting the disciple versus just considering like Ekalavya style. I consider Drona as my guru and then try to learn.
Well, he wasn't completely surrendered.
Yeah, he wasn't. But that's a sign of also a lack of full surrender, right? I mean, you might use that as saying that I have a guru. So, like, how important is this formal, systematic, parampara process of accepting a guru versus just hearing from a guru and then applying it?
Well, when you have a guru, the guru will point out your faults, your mistakes, your inattention or something, and people don't like that. They don't like to be, let's say, instructed. They it's hard for some people to accept any instruction. But if you're surrendered to a guru, you're supposed to accept instruction, or help in your spiritual life. So that's why people will hang around Krishna consciousness, but will not take initiation because they're afraid if they take initiation, they're going to have to hear things that or get instructions that they may not want to follow. Therefore, they decide not to take initiation, but they hang around Krishna consciousness. And there are a bunch of people like that. Why? Because surrender means what it means. You have to surrender. You have to follow whatever the Guru says. And as long as the Guru is saying only things that are Krishna conscious, and then you can't argue with them anymore, right? So some people don't want to put themselves in that situation of surrender. The surrender word is very prominent in Krishna consciousness. We have to surrender to Guru and Krishna. Even in this purport, where does it say that? It says something like that.
I think in the next verse specifically is that.
Okay. A devotee, therefore, is always conscious of his real position. Only by his full surrender to the Lord, by the Lord's grace, are his sufferings made shorter. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto me, and I will give you protection from all kinds of sinful reactions. That is his mercy, Krishna's mercy. But this does not mean that one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, but that does not, I'm going to say that is his mercy. But this does not mean that one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord has committed no misdeeds in his past life. A devotee always prays, for my misdeeds may I be born again and again, but my only prayer is that I may not forget your service, Krishna. The devotee has that much mental strength, and he prays to the Lord, may I be born again and again, but let me be born in the home of your pure devotee so that I may again get a chance to develop myself. A pure devotee is not anxious to elevate himself in his next birth. He has already given up that sort of hope. In any life in which one is born as a householder or even as an animal, one must have some children, some resources, or some possessions. But a devotee is not anxious to possess anything. He is satisfied with whatever is obtainable by God's grace. That's a very important statement right there.
Mm-hmm.
He is not at all attached to improving his social status or improving the status of education of his children. He is not neglectful. He is dutiful, but he does not spend too much time on the upliftment of temporary household or social life. He fully engages in the service of the Lord. So that means he's very active.
Mm-hmm.
And for other affairs, he simply spares as much time as absolutely necessary. Such a pure devotee does not care for what is going to happen in the next life or in this life. He does not care even for family, children, or society. He fully engages in the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. Okay, now this is a very important statement that is misunderstood by people because they think, oh, that means that if I become a devotee, I will ignore my family. That's not what it means. It sounds like not. But that is the wrong interpretation of it. What does it mean? It means that the devotee will spend all his time helping people to become Krishna conscious, but he's not interested in helping his family to become mundane people.
Mm.
So, what do mundane people do? They usually push their kids to be academically advanced, not necessarily spiritually advanced. So, many kids grow up completely concerned about their academics and their position in society. But oftentimes it turns out they don't have any time for Krishna consciousness. They're so busy working on their career. And then once they get their career, they're so too busy working, to be promoted in their career. So all of a sudden, they don't have time for Krishna consciousness. They're so hell-bent on achievements in the material world. That's why, the fundamental question to ask is, if I'm doing this, is it going to help me remember Krishna at the moment of death? Most of the time, the answer will be no, if you're honest. You might be the greatest musician or a poet or something in this world, but it doesn't really help you go back to Godhead. So we have to understand what is actually real success. Real success is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna, and at the moment of death, you remember Krishna and go back to Godhead. That would be called real success. But other people say, no, well, he has a PhD and has this very high position and in their career and a nice house, this and that. That is not success because all those things are temporary.
Yeah, this is very significant because, again, going back to, we were talking about whether it is music, dance also.
Yeah.
Many people learn.
Yeah.
There are many musicians out there, but they don't in the end connect it back to Krishna and memory. Basically, the end point is at the time of death, is that helping them remember Krishna? There are some musicians, definitely they're great devotees.
Mm-hmm.
But majority of the people, it's another skill development.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that is what it is called out, right? Like social status or, advancement, your identity. So those people fall into that, and a lot of those people have a very hard time, like, in their lifetimes. So there are a lot of stories about that.
Well, I've always asked the question to parents. I said, what's wrong if your child becomes a devotee and becomes a pujari? Is there something wrong with that? Why did your child have to become, a professional worker, which means they're a Sudra. The rest of their life, they're working in companies and they're actually Sudras. They're not actually devotees. Right? What's wrong with them saying, well, mom, dad, I don't want to become, a doctor or a lawyer or anything. I just want to be a devotee and do service in the temple. And many parents would get shocked. They say, oh, you're going to be a failure in life. because they think,
as parents, we don't have the faith in the Lord.
Yeah.
That He will take care.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's the parents' fault, actually. And then we feel like, we have come in a certain path.
Yeah.
Most of it was our own endeavor so far. So it's hard for most of these parents, including myself, I'm saying. It was a hard thing for us to believe that simply by serving the Lord will take care. And that is the challenge. I think it's not the kids. I think it's parents that don't have the faith.
Well, yeah, and therefore they're very concerned about academics. Sometimes you can ruin a kid's life by pushing them academics all the time, pushing them. Then the kid has a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And then they refuse to be involved anymore in academics. There are many examples like that where the parents push them so hard to achieve high academic marks and things like that, that the kid has a nervous breakdown. And then they become like a vegetable, you know. Then they have to go to psychiatrists and things like that to start to put their brain back into normal function. So, and I've seen examples like that where the parents were only interested in academic excellence of their child, not really interested at all in spiritual advancement. Good for them. Spiritual advancement is not going to, in their perception, be a viable way of earning a living.
Mm-hmm. So again, time check, Maharaj. It's almost 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a great conversation, and this got recorded as well. I'm sure, like some of them will have more follow-up questions, but
So, Chakrapani, I mean, Chakrapani, I have a follow-up question, but maybe I can ask tomorrow that.
I mean, you can state the question. Maybe Maharaj can touch upon it tomorrow, so that
Yeah, maybe like on Thursday when I visit a service, like I can ask that. But yeah, I have one follow-up question.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if the question is quick, you can ask it. Maharaj may choose to answer because it might be useful for everybody else
It
to
might
hear.
take a time, like so it's already
Okay,
8. I don't want to hog the people like last time I did. So
Yeah.
it can be parked for some other day.
Yeah, don't forget the question then.
Yeah. I wrote it down already.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama.